Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of 10 features every client should use to get the most out of ActionKit. I'm Shannon Turner, a senior software engineer with ActionKit. Let's go ahead and get started. If you've been around a while, you know that I ran the first presentation in this series back in 2019. I still stand by all of these. These are great. You should use them. And best of all, I've recorded the original presentation so you can follow along, and I will link that in the description. Here's the 10 features for 2020, also recorded for your enjoyment. And between 2021 and 2024, we didn't run ClientCon, but last year we were back. And here's the recording. Fast forward to today, here are the 10 features every client should be using. And if this is your first time here, welcome. This is a very fast-paced presentation. Instead of walking you through step by step how to do everything on this list, this presentation is about giving you a taste. Remember, you can always ask us on support for more details about how to set something up. These are all things you can do to get the most out of ActionKit, and includes lots of features that are generally helpful for all clients. So let's go ahead and get started. Number one is mailing build steps, and this is one of my favorite features released recently. This will allow you to see at a glance why your mailing is building so slowly. Now you could do this previously, but you had to click the View SQL and Query Times link, and then you had to know which bit of SQL code corresponded to which report or which piece of your targeting, and none of it was quick or easy. Now all you have to do is click this to expand the build steps pane, and then you can see the timing for every piece of your mailing's targeting. This particular mailing has lots of reports that it runs, and the build steps for your mailing may look a little different. In this example, most parts of the targeting complete in less than 1 second, and that's great. Executing main query takes 1 minute, that's fine, but this highlighted report takes over 10 minutes. If we click this to expand it, it will show you the SQL code that's being run. In this case, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the SQL, it's just that the cache needs to be rebuilt. Caching is when we run a report and we save the results for a little while. And then the next time your mailing's targeting wants to get the results, we'll check to see if we have a fresh set of results already saved to the cache. If so, you'll get the results instantaneously. That's why on the last slide, most of the build steps completed in less than 1 second. The report had already run, and we had already saved the results to the cache. This step, on the other hand, takes 10 minutes to run because the report itself takes 10 minutes to run, and the results weren't saved to the cache yet. We had to wait for the report to finish in order to rebuild the cache. Now, as we saw in a few slides ago, if your reports have already been cached, we can reuse that data for your targeting. It takes less than a second. We love that. But if we have to rebuild the cache, that means the report needs to run in full, and we need to save the results before your targeting can complete. Sometimes you may not want to cache your report, and that's fine. Just know that the mailing will build a little bit more slowly than it might otherwise. For instance, with a recurring mailing, we generally recommend not caching your results. But how long your report takes to run is going to depend on what database tables it uses and how your report is structured. Now, if your mailings build super fast, who cares? You're good. You don't need to pay attention to the mailing build steps at all. But if your mailings are building slower than you'd like, the mailing build steps will help you identify which steps are the slowest. Maybe you can cache a report that isn't cached, or maybe you need to ensure that the cache is built before you build your mailings targeting. And this is the next transition into our next topic, which is caching your reports. Remember that when your mailing report is cached, we can use it instantaneously for your targeting. We don't have to wait for it to run. The place you can do this is on the change report screen if you go down to refresh. And again, you might not want to do it for some recurring mailings. So on the report screen underneath your SQL is the refresh setting highlighted here. You're only going to see this setting if the report is using the mailer or merge categories. And for the purposes of targeting, it will save your report results for the specified period. In this case, every time, which is no cash or maybe hourly. Daily is what we recommend. It's also the default, but you could also do weekly. We typically don't recommend cached queries for recurring mailings, and the good news is that we warn about this in the help text. But in 2024, we made it the default to cache your reports, so if you're using a recurring mailing, you'll probably want to change that setting. But don't worry, caching does not give you stale results when you're viewing or downloading a report. It's only for mailing targeting, and almost always the trade-off is worth it to get faster build times. Now that we have a really solid foundation on what report caching is, I want to talk about number 3, which is scheduling your query rebuilds. If you're using daily report caching for your mailer queries, which you probably are since it's the default for new queries, you can schedule when that caching happens for when it's convenient for you. Daily report caching means for the purposes of your targeting, your report might be, in the worst case, up to 23 hours out of date. Most, on the other hand, will be much, much fresher than that, and you can actually choose when it happens to get the freshest data while also not having to wait on your report to run. So you can have it absolutely freshly run, not even an hour out of date, ready for you to use with your targeting. Just below the refresh setting, if you're using daily refresh, you'll see this daily rebuild time setting. This is when the daily cache will be rebuilt, and it uses your time zone if you set one. If you don't make a choice, that's fine. The cache will rebuild automatically before expiring rather than at a specific time, as long as you've used this report recently in your mailing targeting. Next up is number 4, this match all queries checkbox in the query library options of your mailing targeting excludes. Now, I used to get a lot of support questions like, Shannon, I have 2 reports that I want to use for my targeting, and I want to target this mailing to users who match both of these queries. In other words, the intersection of these 2 reports. How can I do that? Unfortunately, the answer used to be, I'm so sorry, you're going to have to make a 3rd report that contains all of the filter criteria of these previous 2 reports. And in this example, I'd need to make a report that gave me recent donors who clicked on this page but didn't take action. You don't have to do that anymore. Now you can just leave these 2 queries as is and check this box. And I want to be really, really clear. It's totally fine to leave this box unchecked. That may be, in fact, what you want. With this box unchecked, if a user matches any of these queries, they will be part of my targeting. But since so many clients have written in over the years into support and asked for a way to say, I want to match only users who match all of these queries, before we added this checkbox, you'd have to create a single report that combined all of the filter criteria of all of your other reports. So this checkbox, all it really does is allow you to keep your reports small and simple. And I wanted to include it here to highlight how powerful this checkbox is. Number 5 is summary tables. Now, ActionKit has had summary tables for many, many years. These are lightning fast and they contain lots of super useful stats about your users and about your mailings. So when you're putting together custom SQL, or if you're using the query builder, in any case, if you have the option to use these summary tables, You should, because your reports will be so much faster than if you were to calculate these stats from scratch. Many query builder options use the summary tables. Many of our pages, like the mailing report screen, uses these summary tables as well. These are the 5 summary tables that ActionKit currently has. That's summary user, summary mailing mailbox provider, summary mailing subject, and summary mailing variation. 4 of these have stats about mailings broken up by mailing or subject or variation or mailbox provider. So this is really helpful. For summary user, this includes when a user last received a mailing, when they last opened, when they last clicked, what was their last donation, when were they last subscribed, what's their mailbox provider, and a bunch of other really useful stats. And summary mailing mailbox provider and summary mailing subject and summary mailing variation, these all contain really useful performance stats about your mailings. So if you've noticed that the mailing report screen is so much faster than it used to be a few years ago, all of this is thanks to summary tables. The daily send counts report that I'm going to mention in a few slides, watch out for that. That's going to be thanks to summary tables. But all of this is just scratching the surface. You can do so much with summary tables, and I'm really curious to see what reports you come up with in the future. Next up, on the proof and send screen of your mailing, we're going to show an at a glance how many days on average has it been since users who would be sent this mailing have last opened. And for this particular mailing, it's 60 days. We're going to click this link for compare activity levels because there's way much more to this story. But remember, where you'll find this is on the proof and send screen under targeting, and find it under average activity. So if we click compare activity levels, then we see this chart here. On the proof and send screen, we saw that the average last open was 60 days ago. That's fine at a glance, but it doesn't really tell us the full story because, users are enrolled in Apple's mail privacy protection, for instance. They're not going to be counted as having opened a mailing. Here we can also see other stats beyond opens, like what the average click was or the average score pull score. These stats can also be compared to your subscribers overall. So here we would define this as users who have received one or more of your mailings in the last 30 days. And if you hover over this, you'll see a tooltip that'll remind you of that. If you prefer, you can also compare one mailing to another, but I'm not going to show you that today. That chart on the last slide, that's really interesting, that's really helpful, but there's even more context if we scroll down. And in the section titled Limitations of this data, we can see some very important caveats that we have to apply to the previous table. So this is saying that 25% of the users in this mailing have never opened a mailing. This limitations table is so important. I want to put it side by side with the other chart so we can better understand it. If we put these two charts side by side, we can better understand how they relate to each other. So most recipients of this mailing have opened previously, and those users have an average open of 60 days ago. But 25% have never opened. Maybe they're enrolled in Apple's mail privacy protection, maybe they're new users. But that sort of pattern continues throughout each of these metrics, so I think it's important to look at this entire page. So as another example, 93% of users in this mailing set have never clicked a mailing. So the average last click of 139 days, that really only applies to that 7% of users who have clicked. Now, every mailbox provider handles incoming mail differently, and that's where number 7, daily send counts, comes into play. You may have noticed how strict of a mailbox provider Microsoft is, for example. So this report, it's a built-in report, will give you a separate graph of how much mail you've sent to each mailbox provider over the last 90 days. So let's look at a few graphs to understand what we're looking at. You'll be able to find this built-in report at Reports. On the Reports tab, go to Browse All and then search for daily send counts by mailbox provider. Now I want to show several graphs and talk about some things that I like and some problems that I see. So first, let's look at the period here from December 11th through the 26th. I've highlighted here in blue. I love to see this. The volume is steady and even. And if you come to my deliverability presentation, you'll find out more about why that's so important. Number 2, in orange here, I have a problem with. We've basically tripled our sending volume in a very short period of time. Even though you and I can say, but Shannon, it's end of year giving. This still looks like spam to mailbox providers like Gmail, and you're likely to be punished for it, whether that's by having your mail delayed, put in promotions or spam, or maybe even not delivered at all. Between number 2 and number 3, there's a bit of a cooling off period. There's some gaps in sending, but we generally revert back to the average, and that's good. But the period for number 3 really worries me because there's no sends at all for a pretty long time. If that goes on too long, it's going to make it so much harder when you start back up with your sends. So again, avoid big spikes like number 2 here, and avoid long periods of inactivity like number 3. Here's another example. This graph has lower volume, but it still worries me. Almost zero email is being sent in this 90-day window, except for a couple of days where we have big spikes in late December, and then a couple of times in late January, early February. So this chart is the worst of both worlds, with long periods of inactivity, big volume spikes. This sawtooth pattern on the left-hand side, I'm not too worried about that because most senders can go a day or two without sending, not have any problems. But what worries me is the rest of this graph, nearly a month without sends and a big send like once a month. That's asking for trouble. If you want even more deliverability content, then you should check out my deliverability training, which I will link in the description. Next up is a feature that many clients have asked for over the years, and this is being able to show a different ask amount based on whether the user chooses a one-time donation or a recurring donation. So that is number 8, letting you vary your ask amount. And while we're here, we wanted to make it even more customizable so that you could vary the amounts with a URL parameter rather than having to configure them ahead of time on the Pages Edit content screen. Now you have 4 URL parameters that you can use, and that is amounts, weekly amounts, monthly amounts, and annual amounts. Amounts is used for one-time donations, and then weekly, monthly, and annual, that's all for those recurring donations. Here you can see my URL bar with the amounts I want and the numbers separated by commas. When you use these URL parameters, the Make It Monthly checkbox will also be replaced with these buttons for one-time, weekly, monthly, and annually. One-time and monthly will always be options, and weekly and annually will only show if you include them as a URL parameter. And I want to point out that you don't have to limit yourself to whole dollars here. This can be really helpful if you want to show a different set of ask amounts based on the recurring period, because someone who donates monthly will probably donate a lower amount than someone who donates one time or annually. And here's the amounts for annually. Now, the best things about this is that since you can customize the amounts by URL parameter, you can also tailor the ask amounts to your individual users based on their individual giving history. And if you want more information about how to set this up, you should check out my training on payments, which will be linked in the description. Number 9 is snippets in redirect URLs. And for the longest time, redirect URLs had to just be a plain URL. You could redirect from the survey page to a donation page after a user took action, but that was the extent of it. And a lot of you asked about adding snippets to the redirect URL that you'll find on your page's after action info screen. And we added this as a feature pretty recently. In this screenshot, I've added an example of something that you could do. So notice that I have an if for conditional content with an else and an end if, and I have some users' highest previous contribution values as well. And if you're paying super close attention, you'll also see that I'm varying my ask amount here also. Now there's a lot you can do with snippets in redirect URLs. You can use that conditional content or logic like if, elif, else, and endif. You can use custom user fields, which of course, they're custom. It's completely up to you how you use them. And last year I ran a training on custom user fields, which can give you some ideas, and I'll link to that in the description as well. The snippets can be any snippet available on the user, which would be things like highest previous contribution. There's snippets available on actions, such as like, did this create the user? And you can even include arguments that appeared in the URL parameter that you had used previously. So some really practical things that you could do today with this would be to redirect to a different place based on questions like, did this action create this user? Has this user donated before? Does this user have a specific tag or user group? Does this user have a specific custom user field with a specific value? Or was there a specific URL parameter present in the original action? And really importantly, when I say redirect to a different place, that might even be the same page, but just with different URL parameters, right? And so again, you could use this to vary your ask amount with the URL parameters. So someone takes action on a survey page, you redirect them to the donation page, and then it customizes what they see on that page based on how they answered questions on the survey. Finally, number 10, the starting URL that you find on the support form. I want to call attention to this little box here. This is one of the most important fields that you can fill out when you're asking a question on support. So I want to really encourage everyone here to use it. When I'm on support, this starting URL takes a lot of the guesswork out of getting started on your question. Sometimes when I'm on support, it's not always clear from the question which page or which mailing or which report you're having trouble with. A lot of times I'll look at your recent activity and I'll take a guess. Maybe I'll get it wrong though, or maybe I still have to ask for clarification. But either way, that means more time before we're actually able to start on your question and help you out. So this might seem like a really small thing, but this really does help those of us on support to help you much more quickly. So please include it. And so that was all 10 features that every client should use in order to get the most out of ActionKit. And if you'd like to get the slides for this and other presentations, go here. I'll also be including a link to the videos as well. Thank you, everyone.